Hi, this is Wes Simpson, founder of LearnIPVideo.com and contributing editor for TV Technology magazine. We're here today with Shawn Maynard, who is Senior Vice President and General Manager of Florical Systems. And we're going to be talking about centralization for today's TV Tech Talk. Welcome, Shawn.
Thank you, Wes. Actually, one of my favorite topics, so I'm really excited to dive into this one.
Great. So Shawn, centralization is kind of a buzzword. I think a lot of people have used it in many different ways. How would you define centralization for local broadcasters in 20 words or less? How would you say that?
20 words and less. Well, to give it that little buzz phrase there, consolidating resources to reduce redundancy and gaining the benefit of cost of scale for maximum efficiency. How about that for that line?
Sounds good. So really, what you're talking about is getting some of the activities that are normally done at lots of different local television stations and bringing them into a common facility that might be shared within a TV group or across a bunch of different channels. Is that right?
Yeah, and really that's it, Wes, is wherever redundant efforts are being made is an opportunity to centralize and utilizing technology and gain the efficiency there in the operation.
So what are the main drivers for that? What are the reasons that people are looking at doing centralization?
Well, it's what's old is new again. So we're talking about centralization, and that's something probably 15 or more years ago this industry had explored and and some have had successes. We've seen recently that the tail wagging the dog, so to speak, of technology driving a lot of decisions, whereas centralization is an old school approach of it's all about the bottom dollar. It's about saving money. It's about efficiencies in your operation and having this maximum return on investment. So it's really an old school money decision, and that's why to centralize.
And how do concepts such as reliability and quality and disaster recovery play into that? Are they key parts of that decision?
Absolutely. In the world of centralization, you're actually utilizing the latest of technology, and you're actually getting a better quality operation overall. So your efficiencies go up. You can do more with less, and on top of that, your abilities for disaster recovery or doing specialty channels or adding more channels within the environment uh, is all available to you. Whereas in a master control, let's say that's a little outdated, that you may have a challenge when you want to say add on another dot channel,
Hmm.
so forth, and wow, how are we going to work that in the room? We're already maximized, et cetera. So uh, hubbing and centralization gives you a lot more flexibility.
Yeah, and I think as you and I discussed ahead of time, the whole idea of centralization is not an all or nothing thing. You don't have to centralize everything or nothing. You can step through it as we're going to talk about, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's you know in the old days there was a few different models that were attempted, and those models people felt like, well, I've got to do it exactly like so and so did it, and etc. And they go out and buy the same equipment and so forth. But now there's a huge exponential advance of technology that's available today. That again, you do the due diligence and you look across your enterprise and say, where's their redundant efforts, and those become opportunities.
Hmm.
And sometimes at the end of the day, you have to make a decision not to centralize on a particular process because there's so much attached to that process.
Mm.
But why not the other things? Um, you know, centralize what you can, and hold off what you can't.
Well, great. So we put together some slides just to sort of model some of the different levels of centralization. And of course, this first one, call it type zero or no centralization. So what do you want to say about this, Shawn?
You know, the there is one, let's say, myth out there that, and I want to address in the local station market, and this has been a market where you have the manpower to monitor your on-air, uh, your moneymaker, your main channel, and then all the dots that you have available. You've already been doing uh, multi-channel centralization for a long time because there's not a single market that has a single channel anymore.
Hmm.
They're all three or four channels or more in a single market. So that's been a reality. And the myth behind it is, hey, I don't want to centralize because I want to pay somebody to watch my channel and to make sure that what is going on the air is what's supposed to go on the air. Well, we've already been multi-channel for so long. That person has so many other duties in that room. They're not staring and watching TV for a living. They've been doing other things. So you have just as much opportunity for error in a centralized environment as you do in a local environment. Matter of fact, in a centralized environment, you would deploy technology that may catch those things that a local market cannot do.
That makes sense. So the next step up was, we called the type one centralized control and I guess monitoring as well.
Yeah, this is a very easy, let's say, low hanging fruit of capturing some opportunities here. It's something that we've internally at Florical called hybrid casting, meaning that typically, let's say during the day, during the high revenue hours, you have local master control. But at the low revenue hours, why do you need to have multiple people? Why not having one of those stations in the group monitor the others during low revenue hours? Or you could say, hey, let's go into a remote control model and as a permanent model and monitor all of our stations out there. So you can do a partial or you can go all in.
Hmm. Makes a lot of sense. So this next step was centralized ingest. And I know you have a lot of thoughts about that as well.
Yeah, that is definitely, and I talk about low hanging fruit is you're bringing in, let's say, syndicated content, and let's say you have 10 stations, and you all bring in the same syndicated content, and you monitor it, you make sure that the timings are correct, and you store it in a local server for play out, and you're interacting with the automation system to make sure it's ready. That's being done 10 times
Mm.
in a non-centralized environment. And that's, to me, that's non-value added work. That's nine people that didn't need to do it when you can do it once and share that data across your enterprise and capture that efficiency.
Yeah, that makes sense. And you still have the benefits of local playout servers if you feel comfortable with that model, I guess.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Okay. So then the next was, what we call, a lot of people call hub and spoke. So this is where we've moved um, master control and play out to the central hub for all these stations.
Yes. So it's almost like a pure central casting where the majority of your playout and ingest and all those functions are happening at a centralized hub environment, and it's basically servicing your local station with their content,
Hmm.
and that is the pure central casting model of playing from live via over fiber to your local station.
So one of the couple of the terms that we have on here, the hyper-local ingest capability and the local live content. Um, Talk about those. Why are they so important?
Yeah, in a particular model that that Florical's flagship, and not just talk about Florical, but a thing called share casting, where you can have local servers that for those things that are hyper local, whether it's a, you know, Bob's Thrift Shop that did a commercial and so forth, or um, news topicals,
Hmm.
uh, those things that go in, play once, and they're never playing again. Well, why send that content over fiber to a hub to be stored at a hub bucket storage to turn around and play once out of your local market? Why not have, a small local video server that you can feed that hyper local content and mix that within the timeline of the playlist, and that's possible with a model called sharecast.
Got to keep those car dealers happy, right?
Well, that definitely for sure. And, ultimately it comes down to if it has a play once or play twice type thing, why take up hub resources when you can do that locally and the technology provides it?
Hmm. Hmm. So moving further, we could go start putting things in the cloud. Specifically, a lot of folks are using the cloud for disaster recovery in a hub and spoke environment. What are the benefits of that?
All the, right now, if I would, let's say I have 30 stations in my group and I want to deploy a disaster recovery, um, model, and I would have to do that 30 times
Mm,
uh, with equipment purchase, on-prem equipment purchase, and et cetera. But I may or may not use that within the year.
right.
I mean, it's good to have it,
But you
um,
don't want to use it, right?
but
Yeah.
you don't want to use it. And if I have 30 of them, I'm paying the depreciation on that cost that may never get used. And the worst case scenario is I buy a disaster recovery system that sits to the side to protect me. It's really an insurance model, but it depreciates. And let's say I have that and it never got used in 5 years, and now I have to refresh the hardware.
Mm,
That's a worst case scenario. Whereas the cloud environment is really prime for this. It is an Uber of your content, right? You use what you pay for what you use, and you're not paying for the depreciation or the energy and the space in which to store it. So you can have content available in the cloud that sits there for pennies a day, and when you need to light it up, it's it's really a quick reaction that you can light up a playlist with content available and be on the air and feed that. Uh, there's SMPTE ST2110 that's working on more compressed
hmm.
output from the cloud, and you can pump that straight to your facility or straight out to the transmitter, however you want to do it.
So one of the debates about disaster recovery is, to use evergreen content or not. What do you think about that?
I think if it's going to sit there dormant and you just want to have something, then you're going to deploy Evergreen. But if you want a more active disaster recovery, uh, technology today is really had a, has advanced to be able to monitor and manage storage that's on-prem and in the cloud. So I can, within, let's say, a couple of hours, and I'm given a very generous window here, within a couple of hours of play, I can have all the content available for my 24-hour period.
Mm. So you could be pushing to local and to the cloud at the same time, I guess.
Exactly. A lot of really smart media asset management systems are out there that are having touch points in both cloud buckets and local on-prem buckets.
Great. So the next step was, hybrid cloud and using the cloud for some of your channels and not others. Um, why would you want to play your dot channels from the cloud?
Well, they are the set it and forget it channels. The using the old Ronco, tag, set it and forget it. These are channels that have very low interactivity. They're not very dynamic channels. They're plain content, and you know that schedule well in advance. And those things are just perfect for the cloud. Uh, right now, there's a lot of capabilities in the cloud, uh, but when it comes to dynamic activities in the cloud, there's still some challenges that we're working on um, to meet those requirements as a business, not just as Florical, but as a media and entertainment industry, looking at those requirements and saying, "Hey, we need to tighten that up here and there." But for the dot channels that are somewhat set it and forget it, with very little local interactivity, those are perfect to run from a cloud environment.
And in fact, some of the dot channels are coming in over the cloud too, right? You don't even have to almost bring them into your facility.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Interact with them wherever they are, and we are now really moving into a new age of geographically agnostic.
Hmm.
Um, and that's kind of the beauty, especially as we're talking in an age where you can't go in your building. um, Having your building come to you wherever you are is much more uh, desirable.
And now, a pure linear cloud. So here we don't have a connection from the hub anymore to the local stations. We're doing everything from the cloud.
Yeah, and I think that day is fast approaching. And it depends on the style. If we're talking call letter stations, there's still quite a few different requirements that make that somewhat of a challenge. But I
Hmm.
think there's pieces that you can certainly deploy today where it is more of a set it and forget it uh, mode. But I think we're really fast approaching where most of all the functions that you can do on-prem and master control become highly available in a cloud platform environment. So I think we're really close to seeing that as a reality.
So let's talk about some of the decision variables that really impact how people evaluate centralization and figure out what they're going to do.
Yeah, it comes down to, if you look back at past models and you say, well, I need to do centralization like so and so did centralization, and what equipment did they use, and how did they use it, and how much bandwidth did they use it. It really comes down to a cost analysis of risk versus reward analysis and so forth, to say, all right, if I run everything from a centralized environment, how much bandwidth do I need to live on that live over fiber? Or do I want to reduce my fiber cost and have just data movement and connectivity and do a remote control and monitoring? But all of these things need to be vetted out and to look for the most cost effective model for your group.
Yeah, yeah, it's interesting when you talk about doing that modeling. How much disaster recovery do you need? How quickly budgeted downtime is that something that you get into very much?
Yeah, you have to. Well, not all places are created equal. So we look at the landscape of a very large country like the United States, and there's not high availability of fiber in every one of your markets.
Hmm.
So you have to consider that as well. For example, if I'm in, using one example, Grand Junction, Colorado, where there's really one fiber in from Denver and one fiber in from Salt Lake, and that runs through that path, and that's it. So if something disrupts that circuitry, what do you do?
Hmm.
And or if you're on Hawaii, for example, you're literally on an island. And if your connectivity dies, what do you do? So you have to think about some of those models based upon the uniqueness of your environment for each one of those locations. Um, and there again, I mean, cloud could be an option if you can access those and make that a reality. But you always have to consider uh, the disaster recovery to make sure that number one, your revenue is protected, for your signal.
Hmm. Makes a lot of sense. So one other thing that I've been curious about, how does centralization play into ATSC3 migration?
I think it's almost necessary, Wes, in the fact that we want to be able to capture that economy of scale.
Hmm.
right? Because we're going to be doing more than what we've ever done, and the model of what we're doing and how we're doing it is changing beyond our old way of thinking, where all we needed to do is protect a linear feed. But now we're also a provider for other things,
Hmm.
and we're utilizing a lot of the technology. And do I want to duplicate that 30, 40, 50 times, however large my group is, even if you're a small group of 3 stations? Do I
Hmm.
really want to build out an infrastructure for 3 different locations or one,
Right.
and have the advantage? So it really comes down to that.
Well, great. So anything else you think you want to tell our audience about Florical and centralization and ideas
Yeah,
that you have?
for me, it's almost when you talk about centralization, and it's something that's near and dear to my heart. I was a director of operations for NBC for their centralized hub operations, and now in Florical, and we've deployed several different centralized models out there across groups. Um, to me, it's almost like when you say riding a motorcycle. It's not if you're going to have an accident; it's when you're going to have an accident, right? So it's not a matter of if you should centralize; it's when are you going to centralize? You Because we all know in this industry, and again, when I say it's the economy model, it's all about the money. We all know in this industry that we're not gathering more revenue from advertising, but our operational cost is not going down.
Hmm.
So there is a little crossroads here that we're going to hit, where the revenue going down and the operational cost going up, and they're going to cross at some point.
Hmm.
And centralization levels off that phenomenon there,
Hmm.
and it allows you to be able to operate as efficiently as possible, utilizing resources that you have along with technology in a partnership to create a great working model that will save you an operational cost for years ahead, and allows you to be competitive and move forward as a business.
Well, Shawn, thank you very much for sharing your expertise with our audience. Really appreciate that today. My name is Wes Simpson. I am a contributing editor for TV Technology Magazine and founder of LearnIPVideo.com. And my guest today has been Shawn Maynard, who is Senior Vice President and General Manager of Florical Systems. If you'd like some more information on Florical, you can visit www.florical, that's FLORICAL.com. And I think you'll also see a little video here. So thanks again, Shawn.
Thank you, Wes. I'm asked the question several times, is that what makes Florical Solutions different than anybody else with centralizing master control? The big pieces, the apples to apples pieces, you can say all automation systems are the same, and I would somewhat agree with that. But the devil's in the details, and it's the fine tuning. Because of our experience in a myriad of different centralization projects, and how they've implemented those projects and the requirements of those projects, we've actually created within our environment of software fine tuning and almost a custom experience to create the right experience for your centralization project. And I think that's the biggest difference, is that we're not asking you to change your processes to meet our requirements. We're actually creating software that meets your requirements. And that's the Florical difference.